In this video, I will provide you with a couple of ways that you can fix a foundation if it is not straight on one side, and quite possibly an idea that you'd be able to use if it wasn't straight on a few sides. So what we're looking at here is a foundation that is perfectly straight and no problems. However, that will not be the case if your forms don't hold or weren't lined up correctly in the first place. And since the anchor bolts are usually attached to the form boards, which means they are going to be pulled out of alignment as the form boards bow outward and will no longer be in a straight line. So they're going to be off-center just a little bit. And in our example, the bow is going to be 1 inch out of alignment, or a maximum of 1 inch away from our original straight building foundation line. And I'm going to leave that line there to give you a reference point and also provide you with an idea of how some of the anchor bolts will be located inside of a straight base framing plate. However, some of them won't. And it's not uncommon to have the carpenters install a straight wall here and then have someone else come back and chip all of the concrete off here. However, if you do that, that could create a problem for the rebar and even the anchor bolts that might be tied to the rebar, or the rebar if it was tied to the form boards that got pulled away. So if you go in and you chip out 1 inch of the building foundation to straighten everything out, you could end up with rebar and anchor bolts that might only be 1 inch or less away from the new edge of the building foundation once you've straightened it out. So again, we're going to have a problem with some of the anchor bolts that will no longer be centered in the framing plate. And obviously the length of the wall is going to play an important role in solving this problem. And here's what it would look like if we moved the wall out 1 inch with the intention of filling in underneath the wall instead of chipping sections of the wall away. And of course, this is another common repair idea also. However, instead of having these anchor bolts sticking out on this side, we're going to have some of these sticking out on the inside. And I'm not about to suggest that any method I've shared with you in this video will or will not work for your project. However, I am going to provide you with a few things to consider. And of course, one of those things to consider would be contacting the structural engineer on record, because ultimately they are going to be responsible for the project unless you're an unexperienced contractor who fixes this on their own. And then you could be held liable if there were any problems. And trust me, I understand that. As a contractor, I went ahead and did some of this stuff myself, took it upon myself to fix everything. But in reality, if you're a framing contractor and you didn't build the foundation and you're not going to be responsible, then have somebody else assume all of the liability. You're not going to assume any of the liability. And something else you could do if you wanted to move the wall out would be to fur the wall out on the inside. Or if you left the wall in place, fur the wall out on the outside, if that's going to work better for you on your project. And if you noticed, I went ahead and used a wider framing plate so that all of the anchor bolts would fit inside of the wall. And something like this might actually help if this was going to be a structural shear wall. And if you are a structural engineer watching this video, then this idea might work for you. However, as someone who is not a structural engineer, I will not start making assumptions. So again, another method here that might work. Next up on the list would be to make this wall 1 inch wider. And again, this might be something else that will work better for a structural shear wall. And to do this, you might need to use 2x6 and then rip all the 2x6 down to the desired width. And in our example here, it will be 4.5 inches. And again, another idea that might work for your project. Now, if we're looking at a 2-inch bow in the wall, then maybe replacing the 2x4 with a 2x6 wall will solve your problem. Because in reality, you're still going to have 3.5 inches of weight transferring throughout the entire wall. The only difference is you're going to have a section that's going to be curved instead of straight. underneath our new straight wall. So again, I don't really see a problem with the rebar or the anchor bolts. However, this could be a problem if you have hold down bolts or other types of building hardware that could be out of position enough to create problems using any one of the methods in this video. So there you have it, a few ideas for those of you who are wondering how you might fix a problem like this. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know by leaving a comment in the comment area or hitting the thumbs up button.